She took a deep breath, cursing under her breath in her native tongue. Then, with one final glare at the council, she followed. The moment she hit the air, she realized this was going to be far worse than she expected. Scifi had trained in many things: diplomacy, strategy, even combat with energy weapons, but she had never done anything like this. As she plummeted through the air, the wind roared in her ears. Her heart pounded. The jungle below was thick and wild, filled with towering trees and strange, colorful plants. She spotted James falling ahead of her, his body angled perfectly, moving with confidence. How was he so calm? Then, she saw him pull something from his belt. A parachute. Zyra's eyes widened in horror. They were supposed to have parachutes. She fumbled at her own belt and found the small activation switch. Pressing it, she felt a sudden jerk as the parachute deployed, slowing her fall just before she crashed into the thick canopy. Leaves and branches tore at her clothes as she tumbled down, finally landing with a hard thud. Zyra groaned. She was not made for this. A voice called out, "You okay up there, princess?" Zyra's frustration boiled over. "I told you, I am not a princess." James laughed. "Good to know you're still alive." She heard footsteps. A moment later, James appeared from the shadows of the jungle, moving effortlessly between the trees. He was already adjusting his gear, scanning the area like a seasoned explorer. He belonged in the wild. Zyra, on the other hand, felt completely out of place. She stood up, brushing leaves off her robes. "Where do we begin?" James raised an eyebrow. "You tell me. You're a noble. You must have some grand plan, right?" Zyra crossed her arms. "I was not trained for this." James sighed. "Well, I was. So, for now, just follow my lead." Zyra did not like this human ordering her around, but she had no choice. The jungle's challenges. The first few hours were difficult. Zyra was used to clean, advanced cities, not humid, untamed jungles. The air was thick with strange scents, and distant animal calls echoed through the trees. James moved easily, cutting through the brush with a survival knife. Zyra, meanwhile, struggled to walk through the uneven terrain. Every step felt like a battle. After some time, James stopped. "We need shelter before nightfall." Zyra frowned. "Can we not just keep walking until we find safety?" James gave her an amused look. "Lady Zyra, we are the weakest creatures here. When the sun goes down, the real predators come out. We need fire. We need a base." Zyra hated to admit it, but he was right. With no other choice, she helped him gather wood and large leaves to create a small shelter against a massive tree. James worked quickly, showing impressive skill. He also built a fire using only a small metal tool and dry grass. Within an hour, they had a proper camp. Zyra sat beside the fire, exhausted. Her robes were dirty, her hair a mess. She had never felt so unprepared in her life. James sat across from her, calmly eating from a small survival ration. He tossed one to her. "You should eat." Zyra looked at the small, wrapped food in her hands. It was nothing like the fine meals she was used to. She sighed but unwrapped it and took a bite. It was plain but filled with energy. James watched her with curiosity. "So tell me, why do you think humans are wild?" Zyra swallowed and sat up straight. "Because your species is unpredictable. You act on instinct rather than logic. You are aggressive, emotional, and reckless." James smirked, like jumping out of a spaceship into a jungle without a second thought. Zyra narrowed her eyes. "Exactly." James chuckled. "And yet, here you are, working with a human to survive." Zyra frowned. She did not like this realization. James continued, his voice calm. "Not all humans are reckless. Some of us think before we act. We build, we adapt. You think we're wild, but maybe we're just free." Zyra had no response. She stared into the fire, her mind conflicted. The first night, The jungle came alive at night. Strange glowing creatures moved in the trees, and distant howls filled the air. Zaira found herself instinctively moving closer to the fire. James noticed. Cold. She quickly regained her composure. "No, I am simply observing." James smirked but didn't argue. After some time, he spoke again. "We'll take turns keeping watch. You sleep first." Zaira frowned. "I do not need." James interrupted. "You do. If you're tired, you'll slow us down tomorrow." Zaira scowled, but she was exhausted. She lay down inside the small shelter, closing her eyes. Before sleep took her, she heard James whisper, "Humans aren't so bad, are they?" She didn't answer. But for the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong about them. The first night in the jungle had been long and restless. Zaira had slept, but not well. The unfamiliar sounds, the distant roars, and the eerie glow of unknown creatures had kept her on edge. Even though James had remained awake for the first half of the night, she had found no comfort in the fact that her survival depended on a human. When the first rays of the twin suns lit up the jungle, she opened her eyes and sat up. To her surprise, James was already awake, tending to the fire and sharpening a long branch into a spear. His green eyes flicked toward her as he spoke. "Sleep well, princess." Zaira stretched and frowned. "I told you, I am not a princess." James chuckled. "Then stop acting like one." Zaira bristled. "Excuse me." James tossed the spear aside and stood up, brushing dirt from his pants. "Look, I get it. You come from a high-class society where everything is clean, structured, and predictable. But out here, that means nothing. Out here, you're just another creature trying to survive." Zaira's hands clenched. She hated that he was speaking down to her. She was Vartari, one of the galaxy's most intelligent and advanced species. She would not be treated like some weakling. She stood up, brushing leaves off her robe. "Then I will prove I am not weak." James raised an eyebrow. "Good, because today we hunt." The hunt begins. Zaira had never hunted before. Vartari nobles did not need to. Their society was built on efficiency, with food created in controlled environments. There was no need to chase prey in the wild. But James insisted they needed fresh meat. "If we rely on rations alone, we'll run out," he explained as they moved through the thick foliage. "We need to find something sustainable." Zaira sighed. "And what exactly are we hunting?" James crouched near a muddy patch of ground, studying the large clawed footprints pressed into the earth. "Something big." Zaira crossed her arms. "And you think your primitive spear will be enough?" James smirked. "No, that's why we use our brains too." Zaira watched as he started setting up a simple trap. A long rope made of vines, stretched between two trees, designed to trip anything that ran through it. She was mildly impressed. Humans might lack advanced technology, but they were clever. They waited in silence, hidden behind thick bushes. The jungle around them pulsed with life. Strange insect-like creatures buzzed in the air, while small reptilian animals skittered through the underbrush. Then they heard it. A deep, rumbling growl. Zaira tensed as a massive, four-legged beast emerged from the trees. Its body was covered in dark scales, its long tail swayed behind it, and its sharp yellow eyes scanned the area. James whispered, "When it steps into the trap, we strike." Zaira nodded, her pulse quickening. The creature moved forward, then suddenly stopped. Zaira's breath caught in her throat. It had sensed something. And then, with terrifying speed, it turned directly toward them and charged. The fight for survival. Zaira barely had time to react before James shoved her aside. "Move," he shouted as the beast crashed through the bushes, its powerful legs shaking the ground. The trap had failed. James rolled to the side, dodging its deadly claws. Zaira stumbled back, her heart racing. She was not prepared for this. The beast turned its attention to her. It lunged. Zira barely dodged in time, falling to the ground as its massive claws slashed through the air where she had just been standing. She scrambled backward, her mind screaming in panic. James acted fast. He grabbed a burning stick from the fire and threw it at the creature's face. The beast roared in pain, momentarily blinded by the flames. "Ira, get up," James yelled. Zira forced herself to her feet. Her heart pounded, her body shook, but something inside her snapped. She refused to be helpless. Her eyes locked onto the spear James had dropped. She lunged for it, rolling across the dirt just as the beast swiped at her again. Gripping the spear tightly, she spun around, and just as the creature turned toward her, she struck. The spear pierced its side, sinking deep into its flesh. The beast roared, thrashing wildly, its blood splattering onto the jungle floor. James saw his opportunity. He grabbed a sharp stone from the ground, ran forward, and plunged it into the creature's throat. The beast let out a final, shuddering breath, then collapsed. The jungle fell silent. Victory and understanding. Cyrus stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the dead beast at her feet. She had done it. She had fought, and she had won. James let out a low whistle. "Not bad, Princess." Zira turned to him, still catching her breath. For the first time, she did not correct him. James grinned. "See, humans aren't so bad to have around." Zira looked at him, really looked at him. He was different from what she had expected. He was not reckless. He was skilled, resourceful, and brave. And for the first time, she felt something unexpected. Respect. The jungle was silent after the battle. Zira stood over the massive beast's body, her hand still gripping the spear, her heart still pounding. The fight had ended, but the energy of the moment still ran through her veins. She had fought. She had survived. James, standing beside her, let out a slow breath. Well, that was fun. Zira shot him a sharp look. Fun. We were nearly killed. James grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. Yeah, but we weren't. She did not respond, but deep down, she felt something strange, a thrill. The moment had been terrifying, yes, but there had been something exhilarating about facing danger and overcoming it. James knelt beside the beast's corpse, inspecting its thick hide. "This thing's tougher than I thought. We're lucky you got that spear in deep." Zira felt an odd sense of pride at his words, but she quickly pushed it away. "What now?" she asked, regaining her composure. James tapped the creature's scales. "Now, we make use of our kill." Zira frowned as James pulled out a knife and began cutting into the beast's flesh. "You're not serious." James looked up. "We need food, right?" Zira crossed her arms. "Varteri do not eat raw meat like savages." James laughed. "Good thing we're not eating it raw." He gestured toward the fire. "We cook it." Zira wrinkled her nose. The thought of eating jungle beast meat was not appealing. But she had to admit, their food supply was limited. If they were going to survive here for 30 days, they couldn't afford to be picky. Reluctantly, she sat beside the fire as James cut the meat into strips and placed it over the flames. The rich scent of roasting meat soon filled the air. To her surprise, it was not unpleasant. After some time, James handed her a piece. "Try it." Zira hesitated, but then she took a small bite. Her eyes widened. It was good. James smirked. "Told you." She swallowed, trying not to look impressed. "It is acceptable." James chuckled. High praise from a Varteri noble. For the first time, Zira did not snap back at him. Instead, she focused on her meal, realizing how hungry she truly was. The bond of fire. As the fire crackled and the jungle remained quiet, a strange sense of peace settled between them. For the first time since arriving, Zira did not feel like she was fighting her situation. James sat back, looking at the stars through the gaps in the trees. You know, back on Earth, we have stories about times like this. Zyra raised an eyebrow. Stories. James nodded. Yeah, old tales about warriors sitting by the fire, sharing food after a battle. It's a tradition. Fire brings people together. Zyra glanced at the flickering flames. Varteri do not have such traditions. James smiled. Maybe you should. She considered his words. There was wisdom in them. The fire had become more than just warmth. It was a symbol of survival, a shared moment between two very different people. After a moment, she asked, "Why did you agree to this mission?" James was silent for a while, then said, "Because I believe humans and Varteri can be more than just two separate species. We can be allies, maybe even something more." Zyra looked at him carefully. There was no arrogance in his words, no hidden agenda, just honesty. And that surprised her. She had expected humans to be wild, reckless, dangerous. But James was different. Strong, yes, but also controlled, clever, brave. For the first time, she did not see him as just an Earthling. She saw him as an equal. The night's danger. Their peaceful moment did not last long. A sudden low growl echoed through the jungle. Zyra tensed. James immediately grabbed his spear and stood up. "We're not alone." From the shadows, glowing red eyes appeared. Then another, and another. Zyra's stomach tightened. More predators. James cursed under his breath. "Looks like our fire attracted some unwanted guests." 3 slender, wolf-like creatures emerged from the darkness. Their fur was pitch black, their eyes burning like fire. They moved silently, their sharp claws glinting in the firelight. Zyra gripped her spear. "They are hunting us." James nodded. "We took down a big one earlier. Now they're testing us." The creatures circled them, moving closer. One of them let out a low snarl, its muscles tensing. Then it pounced. James reacted fast, swinging his spear. The creature dodged, snapping its jaws inches from his arm. Zyra lunged forward, stabbing her spear at another one. The creature jumped back, but now the others were closing in. They were surrounded. James backed toward Zyra, gripping his weapon tightly. Any brilliant Varteri strategies right now? Zyra's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outmatched. But then she looked at the fire. An idea formed. She grabbed a burning branch from the fire and thrust it toward the creatures. The effect was immediate. The wolves hissed and backed away, their glowing eyes flickering with fear. Zyra swung the flame wildly, driving them back further. James caught on instantly. He grabbed another burning branch and did the same. Together, they forced the creatures away until they finally fled into the darkness. The jungle was silent once more. Zyra exhaled. Fire truly is powerful. James grinned. "Told you." She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Then, to James's surprise, she gave a small smile. Not mockery, not arrogance. A real smile. James smirked. "Careful, Lady Zyra. You might start liking humans." Zyra rolled her eyes. "Do not push your luck, Earthling." But her smile did not fade. And for the first time, she no longer feared the future. The jungle was silent again, except for the soft crackling of the fire. James and Zyra stood side by side, gripping their makeshift weapons, watching the shadows carefully. The pack of creatures had retreated into the darkness, but that did not mean they were gone. Zyra exhaled slowly. "They were testing us." James nodded. "Yeah. And now they know we're not easy prey." She glanced at him. "But will they return?" James smirked. "Maybe. But next time, they'll think twice." Zyra did not argue, but she knew one thing. This place would not let them rest. Every night brought a new danger, every day another struggle. And yet, something inside her had changed. She was no longer just waiting to survive. She was fighting for it. And she was not alone. A growing bond. The next morning, James and Sarah set out to explore more of the jungle. They needed a better shelter, stronger weapons, and a plan for the days ahead. James led the way, moving through the thick vegetation with ease. Zaira followed, watching him carefully. Humans were different from what she had believed. James, in particular, was impressive. He moved like a predator, alert, calculating, aware of every sound around them. But he was also patient. When they reached a wide river, he knelt beside it, touching the water, studying the current. Fresh water, he murmured. This could be useful. Sarah crouched beside him. For drinking. James nodded. Drinking, cooking, and maybe even trapping fish. He glanced at her. You ever caught a fish before? Zaira raised an eyebrow. Do I look like someone who catches fish? James laughed. No, but you do look like someone who learns fast. Zaira paused. He was not mocking her. He was challenging her. And for some reason, she liked it. The cliffside decision. As they followed the river, they reached a steep cliffside that overlooked the jungle. From here, they could see miles of thick trees, distant mountains, and the endless green stretching toward the horizon. James studied the area carefully. This might be a good place to set up camp. Zaira frowned. Why here? James pointed. High ground. Easier to defend. Plus, a great view. Zaira scoffed. A view. We are not here for luxury. James smirked. True, but it helps to know what's coming. She could not argue with that. As she turned to leave, James suddenly grabbed her wrist. She stiffened. What are you doing? Look. He pointed down below. Zaira followed his gaze and felt her stomach tighten. Down near the river, 3 Vartari soldiers were moving through the jungle. Her people. Her heart pounded. They must be looking for me. James's grip loosened. This is your chance. You can go to them. Zaira hesitated. She should feel relief. She should run to them. But something stopped her. She looked at the soldiers, their gleaming silver armor, their energy rifles strapped to their backs, their disciplined movements. They were everything she had been raised to admire. And yet, she did not move. James watched her carefully. You're thinking about it, aren't you? Zaira turned to him sharply. I do not know what you mean. James sighed. You do. You don't know if you want to go back. She clenched her fists. That is ridiculous. Is it? James stepped closer. Look, if you want to go, I won't stop you. But be honest with yourself. Is that the life you want? Zaira's breath caught. She should want to return to her people, to her safe, structured world. But for the first time in her life, she had felt alive out here. She had fought, she had survived, and she had proven herself. And James had treated her as an equal, not just a noble Vartari. He had challenged her, pushed her, and made her stronger. Could she really just walk away from that? The final choice. Zaira took a deep breath and looked at James. What would you do? James tilted his head. Me. He chuckled. I'd stay. Zaira frowned. Why? Because I don't belong in a world of rules and politics, he said simply. I belong here, where strength, skill, and willpower matter more than rank. Zaira looked down at the soldiers again. She had a choice. Return to safety, or keep fighting. Finally, she turned away from the cliffside. James raised an eyebrow. That's your answer. Zaira looked at him, her golden eyes steady. Yes. James smiled. Then let's get to work. For the first time, she was ready. The jungle stretched out before them, wild and untamed. The faint hum of the river filled the air, the rustling of leaves providing a constant backdrop to their efforts. Zaira stood beside the small fire, watching as James worked with surprising skill. It had been several days since they had made the decision not to return to her people, and in that time, They had built something remarkable, a small, functional shelter made from the thick branches and leaves that grew abundant in the jungle. It wasn't a palace, but it was theirs. James worked with efficiency, securing vines to the frame of the shelter to make it more stable. He didn't complain. He didn't rush. He simply worked. Zyra, watching him, felt a strange admiration grow inside her. It was clear that, in this environment, James thrived. His focus was incredible, and he seemed to know just what to do at the right moment. "Need any help?" she asked, standing up from her spot by the fire. James glanced at her and grinned. "You can hold the vines while I tie them, if you don't mind." Zyra hesitated. This was unfamiliar work for her, but she did as he asked. As she crouched beside him, she noticed how at ease he seemed. In her world, everything was calculated and planned. Every action was part of a larger controlled system. But here, in the wild, everything was done by instinct. There was something both humbling and freeing about that. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the jungle floor. The firelight flickered, and the first few stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "How long do you think we can stay here?" Zyra asked, her voice soft. James paused for a moment, then continued working. "As long as we keep pushing forward. The jungle's tough, but so are we." Zyra didn't respond right away. She had grown accustomed to his optimism, even though it wasn't something she was used to. The Varteri were taught to be cautious, to plan for every possibility. But James seemed to live by a different set of rules. Action over caution, living rather than simply existing. It was a perspective she was starting to understand. The test of skill. The next morning, James woke up early, as usual, and began sharpening a new tool, a spear with a sharp stone tip. Zyra had never seen anyone with such patience. James had already crafted a bow, arrows, and even a few traps. Yet each day, he worked like it was his first day in the jungle. Zyra stood at the edge of their small camp, watching him. She had tried to keep up with his pace, but she had found it difficult. The jungle wasn't like the halls of Varteri castles, where everything was within reach, where everything had its place. Here, in the wild, it was different. Every day felt like a new challenge. But Zyra was learning. "Ready for a challenge?" James called out, his voice filled with excitement. Zyra approached, curious. "A challenge?" James held up the spear. "We're going hunting today. I want to see how well you've picked up on the skills I've been teaching you." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "You think I'm ready?" James grinned. "I think you've been practicing enough. Today's the day you show me what you've got." Zyra took a deep breath. Her fingers tightened around the spear as she nodded. "All right, let's do this." They set out into the jungle, the sounds of the wild echoing around them. Birds called to one another in the trees, and small creatures skittered along the forest floor. Zyra followed James, her senses sharpened. As they walked, James explained the importance of patience. "You can't rush a hunt," he said. "You have to wait for the right moment. The creature will give you a chance, but only if you're ready." Zyra nodded, trying to focus. The air was thick with humidity, and the ground beneath them was soft with moisture. Eventually, James pointed toward a large four-legged creature in the distance. It was grazing near a patch of thick underbrush. Zyra crouched, trying to control her breathing. This was her chance. "Remember what I taught you," James whispered. "Stay low, stay quiet." She adjusted her stance, holding the spear tightly, focusing on the creature. It was large, but not too large to handle. She had to get close enough to strike. Slowly, she crept forward. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears, but she kept her focus. Her eyes tracked the creature's movements, waiting for the perfect moment. And then, just as the creature turned its head to nibble on a nearby bush, Zyra lunged. With all her strength, she threw the spear. It flew through the air, landing with a solid thunk into the creature's side. The beast staggered, letting out a low groan of surprise and pain. It started to run, but James was already there, his bow aimed and his arrow flying through the air. The arrow struck true, hitting the creature just behind the shoulder. It dropped to the ground, lifeless. Zyra stood there, breathing heavily, her heart still racing. She had done it. James walked over to her, a proud smile on his face. "Well done, princess." Zyra couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. "I told you, I'm not a princess." James chuckled. "You're a warrior. That's all that matters." A moment of reflection. As they worked together to prepare the meat, Zyra felt a sense of pride. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living, truly living. She had come to this planet thinking she was simply going to endure. But now she realized she was thriving. It wasn't just the hunt. It was the connection she was starting to feel, not just to the jungle, but to James. They were both survivors, and in their shared struggle, something had begun to shift between them. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over their camp, Zyra sat beside the fire, watching the flames dance. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to face it. Together, the jungle was alive with sounds of the night, as Kyra and James sat by their fire. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind, moments of intense danger mixed with quiet, reflective peace. Zyra felt like a different person now, stronger, more capable, and more connected to this strange, wild world. James was beside her, sharpening his spear as the fire crackled between them. The shadows of the jungle stretched long, and the air was thick with the scent of wet leaves and fresh earth. The fire's warmth was a welcome relief from the coldness of the jungle's night. "Do you ever miss home?" Zyra asked, her voice quiet. James paused, his hand still on the spear. "Home." He looked at her, raising an eyebrow. "I guess I do, sometimes, but I think I'm getting used to this." He gestured around them. "This place, this life, it's simple, it's real." Zyra studied him for a moment. "Simple? Yes, I suppose it is. But for you, isn't it hard? No family, no city to return to." James smiled softly. "Well, we're not exactly living in a city either. But honestly, I think I've learned more here, with you, than I did back home." Zyra felt a strange flutter in her chest at his words, but she quickly pushed the thought aside. "I never thought I'd learn anything from a human." James chuckled. "Well, I never thought I'd be taught how to survive by a Varturi princess." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't help the smile that tugged at her lips. It felt nice, comfortable, to joke like this. There was something about James that made her feel not alone. "I suppose you've earned your place as my equal," she said, her voice softer now. James raised an eyebrow. "Equal, huh? That's a first." He grinned. "I'll take it." Zyra laughed lightly, her golden eyes sparkling in the firelight. "Don't get too comfortable." They both fell into a companionable silence, the sounds of the jungle wrapping around them like a blanket. After a moment, Zyra broke the quiet again. "Do you think we're ready?" James looked at her, his face serious now. "Ready for what?" Zyra took a deep breath. "For whatever comes next. The dangers. The unknown." James nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think we are." His expression softened. "We've come this far together, and together we can face anything." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't realized just how much she had come to depend on him. James wasn't just a companion. He had become someone she could trust, someone who had stood by her through every trial, every battle, every moment of fear. There was no longer any doubt in her mind. She didn't need to go back to her people. She didn't need their rules or their expectations. What she needed was the freedom she had found here, and the partnership she had built with James. "You're right," she said softly. "We've made it this far, and I'm not leaving now." James smiled, a real smile this time, and nodded. I'm glad to hear that. Suddenly, a loud, echoing sound rang through the jungle, a strange rumble, like something was moving quickly through the underbrush. Zira immediately stood up, her senses alert. What is that? She asked, her hand on her weapon. James stood too, his eyes scanning the dark jungle. I don't know, but it's big. The rumbling grew louder, and then from the trees ahead, something massive emerged. It was a creature unlike anything Scifi had seen before. A giant beast with thick, muscular legs and scales that shimmered in the low light. It was about the size of a small building, and it moved with a slow, heavy gait, each step causing the ground beneath them to shake. Zyra's heart raced. That's a predator, and it's heading straight for us. James's expression hardened. We need to move. Without another word, they both ran toward their shelter, gathering their weapons and supplies as quickly as they could. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the creature drew nearer. They didn't have much time. James turned to Zyra. We can't outrun it, but we can fight it. Zyra nodded, gripping her spear tightly. This was their test, a final challenge to prove what they had become. As the creature neared, it bellowed, its deep roar shaking the leaves overhead. It was close, too close. James didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, his bow in hand, aiming carefully as he fired an arrow into the creature's side. The beast roared in pain, but it didn't stop. Zyra moved quickly, darting to the side to get a better angle. She threw her spear, aiming for the creature's heart. The spear pierced the beast's thick skin, but the creature only staggered before charging forward, intent on crushing them both. James shouted to Zyra, "Move, now." Zyra barely had time to react before the massive creature was upon them. She grabbed James by the arm and pulled him to the side, narrowly dodging a crushing blow from the beast's clawed hand. The beast's eyes were wild with rage. It swung its massive tail, knocking over trees in its path as it searched for its prey. Zyra's pulse raced. This was it. But then, as if everything fell into place, she realized what needed to be done. She looked at James, her eyes meeting his with clarity. I have an idea. James raised an eyebrow. What's your plan? Zyra smiled faintly. Follow my lead. With that, she grabbed a large log and tossed it toward the beast, distracting it momentarily. James took the opportunity to fire another arrow, aiming for the creature's eye. This time, the beast howled in pain and began to stumble, its massive body swaying as it fought to stay upright. Zyra and James worked together, dodging and attacking, each move synchronized perfectly. The creature faltered, weakened by their efforts. Finally, with one last strike, James pierced the creature's throat, and it collapsed with a deafening crash. The jungle fell silent once again. Both of them stood, breathing heavily, but they were alive. Together, they had defeated the creature. James wiped his brow and turned to Zyra, grinning. See, I told you we could handle it. Zyra smiled, a feeling of satisfaction settling in her chest. I guess we make a good team. James's grin softened. The best team. For the first time since their journey had begun, Zyra knew without a doubt that this partnership was not just about survival. It was about strength, the strength they had found in each other, and the strength they would continue to build together.